I'm your host, Colby Conway, at Colby R. Conway. And this week, ladies and gentlemen, at least for this episode, this one's going to be an hour. I know you're only used to Matt and I for 29 minutes, but it's 59 minutes today. Over the weekend, we had the MLB Draft, or the 2023 MLB Draft, and obviously that's going on for a couple of days as we are recording. There are still picks that have been happening throughout the day. So we're just going to break down the first round here today, but we're going to go pretty in depth. So if you're in dynasty formats and when that draft comes around, you are going to get inside the brain of Matt Selz at the Salesman and his thoughts. This is basically the prospect report that Matt does brought to life, because now we have homes for players. It's not speculation anymore. For many of the fantasy relevant ones, we have homes. Matt, it's going to be a great episode here. But before we start talking about many people whose lives were changed yesterday, as we're recording this Monday evening, so Sunday night, many players' lives have changed. How's everything going for you?
Things are going well. Things are going well. It's another year in which your favorite team and my favorite team picked back to back. So things got interesting right off the we had the first two picks, right? So rapid fire, it was going to be known. I'm having a pretty good time. For those of you who are just getting into the baseball draft, know that even the best players taken are still, you're probably not going to see them for at minimum a year, if not a year and a half to two, right? Secondly, if you're wondering what your favorite team is doing, taking a bunch of college dudes in the middle rounds, it's to save money to sign the high-priced high school kids they drafted earlier. Okay, doesn't work like the NFL draft where you draft a guy and then you basically can sign him. Teams have slot bonuses. Uh, they have pool money. They can allot it however they see fit to sign the guys, right? So there's a lot more nuance, I guess, to the MLB draft. But I'm having a pretty good day. Good racing in Atlanta this weekend too for NASCAR.
It was quite the sports weekend, to say the least. I don't know if you saw that I flipped my background here. I didn't mirror my camera because I've been told you I had a little surprise for you, and you kind of led me into it. So let me just go ahead and throw it up here. How does that look? Here, can you see it? You want me to move fully out of the way
It'd
so
be
you can see
better if
it?
there was a DC next to it and not Bucks colors there.
That's not
I mean,
how things work here.
I cannot blame the Pirates for taking a generational pitcher number one overall. If you think about it, they have some intriguing bats in their system and youngsters on their minor league or their major league roster. They don't really have a bevy of pitching, right? You got Quinn Priester, intriguing. You got Mitch Keller, who's starting to figure it out, but who knows what happens in the next year or two when they lose contractual control, right? After that, Rayon Contreras, intriguing, but you can't miss a chance to go after Paul Skeens, who was a generational arm. So congrats on winning the MLB draft lottery and not screwing up the pick.
Can't ask for much more than that. Really, it's all as
I'm
a
more
Texans
bitter about
fan.
last year when y'all jacked Tamar Johnson, but that's
Well, I don't have that background to throw up real quick. I didn't get that one. I was too excited to get the Paul Skeens one today to throw it up there. But obviously, we'll talk about the picks. This is another good draft for Pittsburgh. I'm excited about the future, and hopefully, Skeens, he's not going to be up this year. Obviously,
no.
I would even
Although
Pittsburgh
I
likes to
did
slow
get
play.
one joking question in Discord in the uppercase, lowercase, uppercase thing, so it's a joke. As soon as he was picked, they were like, "Hey, Selz, when are the Pirates calling up Skeens?"
They do slow play their arms. That's the only thing with
I don't
Pittsburgh.
think they're
They
going to have
tend
to
to.
slow play this one.
Well, but that doesn't mean they won't.
Correct. Although we did see Seattle get the first ever player promotion incentive pick at the end of the first round for breaking camp with Julio Rodriguez, and then he did well enough to win the Rookie of the Year, which didn't have to if they finished top 3 in Rookie of the Year or top 3 in Cy Youngs or MVP. Then you get an extra pick at the end of the first round, which is incredibly valuable. So maybe Pittsburgh will do that. We'll see.
The draft was very fun for a couple of reasons. I didn't know how much I loved the incentive, the what is it, the player promotion incentive?
I think
Is that
so.
what it
It's
is?
PPI, and I'm pretty sure that's what it's. I
That
think
tracks.
that's the. Yeah.
I didn't know I loved it that much. And now we saw it. I love it because this is going to get the young talent up sooner. There's going to be
Right.
teams, there are going to be teams that won't bring someone up to let them work on their defense for 2 weeks and then bring them up. That's bound to happen. But in these situations, like, look at the Mariners. I mean, J Rod was a guy who deserved to be there. He did. He
Right. Oh,
performed.
one other catch. They have to be a top 100 prospect, I think, across the three main providers, which is Baseball America, MLB Pipeline, and ESPN. That's the only other.
Yeah, but even
But
so, like that, this is this is what we want. You put the
right,
best players out there and don't let them toil just to work on their
exactly.
defense for
Expect
2 weeks.
expect Miami to get one next year for calling up Yuri Perez because he's going to get votes for Rookie of the Year,
Yeah, and we'll have
as
to
well as
see.
Corbin Carroll, by the way.
And then I love it. I love it more now that I love it way more now that I've seen it in action and see how it can work. And also, I love the lottery. I I
Well,
love
you
it.
should,
Well, I know. Yeah, I have selfish
Although,
reasons as to
didn't the
why I love it.
Pirates have the worst record? Like they were going to beat the Nats out on record anyway from last year, I believe.
I mean, I don't. I don't really love it for the Pittsburgh side because I do believe that you're correct, but more so like the Twins who moved up a
The
boatload
Twins
of
moved up from
spots.
13th to 5th and got a guy who could have been taken number one. Although, I mean, he wasn't going to be, but he was in the discussion for that skill set.
Well, he was one of the literal handful of
Yes.
players that were that kind of that creme de la creme of
Right. You
the
had Paul
player pool,
Skeens, Dylan Cruz, Wyatt Langford, Max Clark, and Walker Jenkins, and they got Walker Jenkins. But
which
if
they
they
wouldn't
picked
have
13th,
otherwise.
they would never have gotten a shot at.
Yep. So I love the lottery. I love the PPI. It was a great start to the draft. So Matt, you kind of talked about there. We basically said there were the 5 players that were going to go 1 through 5 in some order. Barring
Right.
anything crazy, it was going to be that. So it was Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, Max Clark, Wyatt Langford, Walker Jenkins. So that's the order that they went 1 through 5. To me, if Skeens and Cruz were going to be 1 and 2, I
Correct.
think that was fine. If Langford would have went 1, like that I saw that was circulating for a little bit.
It
That
would
could
have
have
only
been
been for leverage, I guess, because
correct.
Skeens might have commanded a higher signing bonus than Langford, I guess. But
That would have been the only head scratcher just in terms of like kind of how it would. But again, any of those guys you could have made the case at 1. For me, looking in the top 5, I thought Detroit was going to go Langford. If I'm not mistaken, they had a
yep.
track record with college bats, and instead they took Max Clark. And I mean, it's one of those things. We talk about it in fantasy sports. You get your guy, right? Maybe
Yep.
Clark was Detroit's guy all along. And that's just how it was going to be. So, and then obviously Langford went 4, and I love Walker Jenkins going 5. We got to see him play this year. So that was pretty cool there. So inside the top 5, there's really no head scratcher here. All these guys could
No,
have gone 1. You could have made a case. But was there anything here that may have surprised you, we'll say, and more so than a head scratcher?
I'm with you on Detroit. That's really the only, because the other way to look at it is not only did they have a track record with college bats, but their better bats in their system are starting to reach the upper minors, right? We talked about this last pod. They just promoted Colt Keith to AAA, right? Jace Jung's probably going to go to AA here pretty quick because he's having a pretty good year at high A. You've got, some other top guys are starting to hit AA and AAA. Justin Henry Malloy is in AAA. So in terms of their rebuild getting underway, I would have thought that Langford would have been able to join that group of all coming up, and then you get everybody there at the same time. But I mean, I can't fault them for Max Clark. They're very good. That's the only reason is that maybe he's a couple years behind Wyatt Langford, so your rebuild takes a little longer. But hard to argue against any of those guys.
They got their guy. It's very possible that he was their guy. And I mean, obviously he must have been because Langford was still on the board and they
Yeah,
took Clark. And it's one
I
of those
mean,
things too. Maybe they're playing the long game, but maybe they truly believe Clark's ceiling is higher. Because I know on the broadcast, it was Harold, I think Harold Reynolds had said it that he sees like shades of Corbin Carroll in Max Clark, which I obviously know is best case scenario, obviously.
yeah.
Um, But maybe that's what they truly believe. Like these teams, they have their scouts, they have their things that they get their guy. Detroit clearly had their pick, so it's not like if
There's also
Langford was
weather.
available.
There's
Well,
also weather too, right? Because
yeah.
like Walker Jenkins played in North Carolina. Doesn't get that cold in North Carolina, right?
Whoa, it gets in the 40s.
Okay, but not like snow on opening day in Detroit, right? Which we've now seen, I think, 3 of the last 4 years, if I'm and Wyatt Langford, Florida. He spent a bunch of time in sunny Florida. Not saying that warm weather dudes don't translate in baseball, whatever. But Max Clark's from Indiana, which is one state down, get basically the same weather. So maybe that's we're sometimes the colder weather guys don't have that slow start to the season in the northern, in the more northern teams.
Yep. It's very, very possible there. Ultimately, in the top 5, other than Clark going at 3, it was more so the spot that was surprising, but none of the players in the top 5 were
Correct.
surprising. They were the top 5.
Yep.
They were meant to be the 5 picks. That's
Yep.
just kind of how it is. Now, I don't want to say the draft started at 6, but I think most people that were making mocks had
That was the first wild card, not only for the team that was there, but also because that's where the talent pool, there was a tier, and then now you're into 1B tier, right?
Yes. So then when we look at picks 6 through 10, Oakland takes Jacob Wilson, a shortstop. Reds get Rhett Lauder. Royals take Blake Mitchell, high school backstop. Rockies 9 take Chase Dollander out of Tennessee. And the Marlins take another high school arm in Noble Meyer. So let me tell you this. I think my favorite pick, honestly, and I hate to be kind of chalky, but for me, I think is Rhett Lauder. Cincinnati, okay, I can't italicize like a spoken word, but they can develop pitching.
Yes.
Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they can. And Lauder, I know everything's about Paul Skeens, and I'm not taking away from Skeens, but
He went pitch for pitch against Skeens in the College World Series.
he did. And Lauder has the changeup. Very, very good changeup. And as a former player, and I think many players will tell you, sometimes the changeup is one of the harder pitches to hit, just because it
Especially
looks
in
like
that ballpark, it comes in handy.
Yeah, and it looks just like the fastball, comes out like a chain. So I really like Lauder going. I'm very happy with his landing spot. I would have loved to see Walker Jenkins go to Cincinnati, but glad he didn't fall. But with a guy like Lauder, I think he was my favorite pick there to Cincinnati. And man, would it be cool in like 3, 4 years, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Rhett Lauder.
He's not even going to be 3 years. Like Lauder will be up.
Well, I'm
2.
being conservative.
But yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I know we normally talk about pitching and like the changeup gets set off and gets set up by a fastball. How about for Lauder, his changeup gets set up by Hunter Green's fastball? Because one day you got to gear up for 102, and the next day you got to gear up for a changeup that looks like it's coming from a fastball, but now you've got a 20-mile-an-hour difference between yesterday's fastball and today's changeup. Like,
But Lauder still got there's still some gas in that arm of his too. Like he can still ramp up into the upper 90s too. No, not Hunter Green style.
He's not like slow pitching, right?
Right.
My favorite pick is Noble Meyer.
Okay, hold on a second. I don't want to cast aspersions or ridicule this kid who maybe has his driver's permit at this point. That voice was not what I was expecting from him. Like he walked up there like
phenomenal.
this. I don't for sure. He walked up there with this twig and then had this kind of deep lowered voice. And I was like, that is not what I was expecting.
It's like Rick Astley, right? Pitch. It's like Rick Astley. He like Rickrolled people with his voice.
Yeah,
right?
He did. But I mean, that kid is nuts.
Yeah, he's really, really good. Now he goes to a team that's done nothing but develop pitchers like nonstop for the last like 7. If you even go back to Jose Fernandez, rest in peace. But like Jose Fernandez, now you got Sandy Alcantara, who despite this year, pretty good pitcher. Yuri Perez, we've all seen what he can do. There's some dudes still coming that they have in their system. If Sixto Sanchez ever gets healthy, they got that guy. Now you add Noble Meyer to it. We'll touch on another guy later and why they may or may not have won the draft for me. But to get him at 10 is pretty impressive. He's just every bit of an ace. They may line up with 4 aces in that rotation in like 3 years.
Yeah, that one I did like that pick a good bit. Let's jump up to 8 quick. Just because 8 and 9 are the picks that I'm curious to get your takes on. I
Yes.
know the broadcast was a little bit critical of the Royals pick in terms of taking a high school catcher, as sometimes I guess it's as MLB.com and their article calls it, a risky demographic.
Yeah, they don't tend to necessarily develop as quickly as or as polished as college guys.
But I mean, yeah, there's going to be an adjustment. He'll have to learn the defensive side of things, but the bat's ready. Kid's got a rifle of a right arm, so there's a lot to like there. It Kyle Teal's a guy that I know you really like because he was in your prospect report and we talked about him a couple pods ago on Farm Friday or Down on the Farm with Matt Selz at the Selzman on Twitter. Give him, aka this one right here, a follow there on Twitter. But Mitchell went before Teal. Teal wasn't too far behind, but Mitchell went. So is this a case of Kansas City's just maybe they love the high school bat, maybe they like the defense, or do you think that they think that the kid's ceiling is just immense?
So when we were talking about the difference between Mitchell and Teal, I had him basically 1A and 1B in catching. Like, I don't think that there's that big of a gap between them. I thought what was going to happen was a team that wanted a quicker run to the majors was going to take Teal, and a team who maybe wanted to let the guys do a little bit would take Mitchell. That's what happened, right? Mitchell goes at 8. Who's the Royals catcher right now? Salvi Perez. Still a pretty good major league catcher, right? Have a few years left on that contract. Who's their second in a pinch catcher who can also play outfield? MJ Melendez, right? By the way, both of whom were signed internationally at high school age and developed just fine. So, fine. So they have the ability to let Blake Mitchell sit there and develop and take his time and whatnot and be the replacement for Salvi Perez and MJ Melendez, right? If we transition to the next part of the draft with best picks, Kyle Teal went to the Red Sox. Anybody know who the Red Sox starting catcher is right now? Like Connor Wong?
Sounds like Kyle Teal.
A guy they got as a throw-in for the Mookie Betts deal, who I think, that deal's just terrible. But they don't have anybody in their system right now at catcher who's an impact anything, right? So you take Kyle Teal, you let him develop for a couple of years probably, who, by the way, I'm pretty sure Jason Varitek is in their minor league, their farm development program. Who better to learn from than Jason Varitek, right? So they went to the proper teams here because Teal will be up shorter. He'll be an impact bat for the Red Sox. Blake Mitchell can sit there and develop and then fill in for Salvi Perez when the contract runs out.
And then the last one in the top 10 I'll ask you about here. No shade to Jacob Wilson at going 6'2", athletics. Obviously, dad was a big league player, a lot to like about his offensive profile. But the one that was interesting to me, and I'm curious what you think about this, the Rockies went pitcher.
Yes, they need pitching.
They do.
I actually really like this pick for the Rockies.
Okay, so then let me ask the question in this way. How do you evaluate the past year's performance from him? Because the ERA jumped, the home runs jumped, the walks jumped, but still remained very prolific in the strikeout department. We can't just ride off Chase Dollander's 2023 season.
Correct.
But we have to acknowledge it. So, like, what made you like the pick so much? Was it basically best player at team need? Or do you think that the Rockies, I'm going to throw some shade here, can actually develop a young arm?
So, couple things. One, I think what happened with Dollander is he was trying to be perfect to outproduce Skeens to be at the top of the draft, right? Because if we flash back to this time last year, Dollander was expected to be the best arm in the draft.
Right? Well, he went 10-0, sub 2.5
right.
ERA.
And he was routinely putting it up there like 102 miles an hour, right? So I think he put a little too much pressure on himself for Tennessee to be out dueling LSU and whatnot. And then Wake Forest shows up and Rhett Lauder's out pitching him, right? But secondly, here's where things get interesting with the Rockies. I think they can develop pitching. I think what it is a mindset that these kids come up and think they have to be perfect because of the small, like the park dimensions they will eventually be and conditions they will eventually be pitching in, right?
Yeah.
What was the most hitter friendly ballpark in the SEC? Tennessee. They have a small park. So if he's figured out how to pitch and keep the ball in against SEC competition, who, by the way, we've seen go at the top of the draft like routinely over the last 5 years, including this one. Um, I think there's hope that he has the mindset that, hey, I know how to pitch in these conditions, and his stuff plays because it's not necessarily a lot of looping curveballs, or his stuff is tight, which plays better in the thinner air at Coors Field.
Yeah. I mean, the kid's filthy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that he's not, but
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, should they never draft pitching?
well, I mean, that's the
Because they need it in the minor leagues, right? You can't
for
play
sure.
games in the minor leagues without pitching.
For sure. I mean, to say they never should take one is an exaggeration. Obviously, they should. I mean, they should. But like the other, I guess the flip side to that argument is if it's going to be a bad pitcher's environment, would you just wait till like the second round? But at that point, I guess what does it really matter?
I don't know.
Like,
They developed John Gray just fine.
and I guess the thing is, talent can win out in that park. It's not to say
Yes,
like every pitcher who goes to Coors does not get lit up for 13 runs. Like every game
correct.
there is not a 17 to 9 or 17 to 15 game. Like we saw Ubaldo Jimenez dominate there. Like we've seen
Right.
other starters go there. Like pretty much any left-hander that goes to Coors this year dominates because the Rockies can't hit a lefty to save their life.
Correct.
So like it's not to say that the park is impenetrable by talent by any means. It's just it's an interesting talking point because like lately the arms haven't been the development on the arms hasn't been great.
I think it's more of a development thing than a park thing, because if the argument is, well, parks get lit up, then how are the Reds developing pitchers? Because they give up more home run. Like that park gives up more home runs than Coors.
Mhm.
The Angels have been decent at developing starters, right? Angel Stadium is a home run haven. The Dodgers can do it. That's been a home run haven. The line in the AL East has been, oh, they're all bandboxes and pitching sucks. Look at the Rays. Look at the O's developing pitching. The Yankees haven't developed any homegrown talent of any kind in forever, so they don't really count. But the Red Sox are developing pitching, right? Same with the Blue Jays. So I think it can be done. I think it's an organizational thing, and the Rockies are generally a badly run organization. But I do like this pick.
Yeah, and I mean to be fair, if you go back, like I'm just looking back here. I mean, dating back to I'll cherry pick it 2011, first round pitcher since then that they've taken Tyler Anderson, Eddie Butler, John Gray, Kyle Freeland, Mike, I believe it's Nickerack, Riley Pint, Robert Tyler, Ryan Rollison. So like there are a couple hits in there. Like I'm not
Yeah,
saying that they
Rollison's still
can't do it.
coming. He had a
Yeah,
mental thing. Riley Pint still trying to figure it out. He had a lot of talent, but I think it's a developmental.
for sure.
And
Very
pitchers are
well.
tough to develop.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I hear you there. But the next 5 picks that we saw go off the board: Angels, D-backs, Cubs, Red Sox, who obviously we talked about Kyle Teal a little bit, and then the White Sox took Jacob Gonzalez at 15. A lot of stuff that I was seeing. Him creeping into the top 5 wasn't necessarily out of the equation. But before we talk about him, let's go to Kyle Teal. How happy do you think the Red Sox had to be? Because this was a need,
very
best player, and it's the one they needed, like you had already talked about in the Teal versus Mitchell conversation.
right. They don't necessarily need middle infield. They have that at the major league level. They have Marcelo Meyer coming. He was in the futures game for
And
them.
Jeter Downs.
No, actually, I'm pretty sure he's in the Nats minor league system, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, and
Um,
that 40% strikeout rate finally did him in?
yeah. They've got theoretically Alberto Mondesi whenever the hell he's healthy. Trevor Story. So they've got some guys that can play in the middle infield. They've got theoretically Tristan Casas coming, Blaze Jordan. So they don't really have any catching. So that was their pick. Aced it. As much as it pains me to say the Red Sox aced a pick, they did. Jacob Gonzalez, pretty nice pick. I mean, the White Sox need everything, so they could have picked anybody, and it would have been a solid pick. But things get interesting at 11 through 13 for me. We'll talk about one of them later, so I will leave that off. But at 12, look, it's been a great year for the Diamondbacks, but I really don't get Tommy Troy as the pick here. He's a baseball player, right? Now, that may sound, yeah, sure. We're talking about MLB draft. Okay. When I say a baseball player, it's just a guy who's really good. He's like a little bit good at everything, but not spectacular at any one thing, right? He's just a plug and play dude. My problem though is he doesn't really fit defensively a lot. Like he's not a lockdown guy defensively. I think he may be like a utility dude. And that's a little early, in my opinion, to be taking a guy who may just be a utility guy. Like he's not a bad player. He's good at a lot of stuff. He's at least average at across the board, if not above average at a lot of stuff. But there were dudes with plus tools with really high upside available there that probably should have been taken. And Matt Shaw, he's again not terrible, not a terrible pick from the Cubs. They need some developmental help, but my only question is, what do you do? I mean, the argument has been made that shortstop is the best infield position to take because you can move those dudes anywhere because it takes an athlete to play shortstop. But you just locked up Dansby Swanson for a while. You've got some guys coming in the middle infield, so it's just a weird place to take him. Not that Shaw is terrible by any means. I think he's a solid enough bat, but I just don't really get the pick when there were higher upside dudes behind him.
So when you look at picks 12, 13, and 15, D-backs, Cubs, and White Sox, all three took listed shortstops. Obviously, in the order it went was Tommy Troy, then Matt Shaw, then Jacob Gonzalez. How do you think the order should have went then?
I think Jacob Gonzalez probably should have been the first one off the board. And then, I mean, I guess I'll give the Cubs this, that I have Matt Shaw probably the second one off the board, and then Tommy Troy third. But again, I wouldn't have disliked seeing some other guys. Like if you're going to go shortstop, I would have gone Arjun Nimala, who went later. I could have even gone third base and gone Brock Wilken earlier, or Braden Taylor at shortstop and getting a very good college bat who will be ready sooner, right? The Cubs are competing now, surprisingly. Diamondbacks are competing now. You need a little bit higher end college bats. So those are some of the dudes I might have looked at there.
And you just mentioned a lot of picks in this 16 to 20 range, or actually, let's go 16 to 9. Well, let's go 16 and 20 because you mentioned Namala. So let's start with him. Very young.
Yes.
Has the cricket background, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So he's got that involved. So what entices you about him? Is it the projectability at a young age? Is there anything else beyond that? What is so intriguing about him? Because the way you make it sound, it's that the Blue Jays got an absolute steal at pick 20.
Well, they did. I had Nimala pretty close to where everybody else did, about 11 to 13, somewhere in their ranking. So the Blue Jays basically got a 10 pick value. It's cool. He's the first Indian baseball player I think ever drafted, or certainly drafted this high in the MLB draft. He's got a lot of projectability. He's already got power, which he can add more because he's still going to physically mature. There's some nice bat to ball skills that are already in place. You could find a little bit more hit tool. But he's got everything that you need already in place at 17 and has projectability because he's only 170 pounds and a 6'1" frame. So there's some weight that can be added, which should induce some more pop. You can keep him at shortstop, which is a premium position. If you had to, you could move him to second and get yourself a cannon of an arm at second base. So I think that's a really nice pick by the Blue Jays there.
And then the Giants actually announced as a two-way player in Bryce Eldridge. So where do you fall on I'm not even going to say him being Otani-esque, but what do you think about his chances of actually being a two-way player? Like, is this a very viable thing? He's a first-round pick, so the talent's clearly there. Are the Giants going to give him the leash to actually try to do so?
I think so. They took a first rounder last year who was also a two-way player, and so far they're giving him the leash to try it. I suspect that we're going to see more of these now with Otani being full-fledged in his prime. Does it mean that everybody's going to be able to pull it off? No, because what Otani's doing is just ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can he pull it off? Yes, I do think he can. They're certainly going to give him every possibility to pull that off for sure. He's got electric stuff on the mound. He's got very nice hit tools. If it doesn't, I would suspect that they lean more towards him being a pitcher than a hitter because he's got some serious velocity. He's got some serious spin. He's got very, very good tools. A couple of pitches that are burgeoning on plus. Whereas the hit tools, power, speed, all that right now are about average, which isn't terrible, right? But if they need to switch him, I would suspect that he goes more pitcher route than hitter route.
And speaking of plus tools, let's talk about plus tools.
Mm-hmm.
Enrique Bradfield.
My favorite pick in this range.
Okay, well, that made that easy. But during his time in Vanderbilt, 47 stolen bases back in 2021, 46 in 2022, and 37 here in 2023. Actually wasn't caught at all in 2022. Batting averages were fine. It seems more contact than power to him.
Correct.
And obviously his main speed his main calling card is going to be speed with some plus defense as well. So just why was he your favorite pick in this range then? You must be captivated by at least the overall talent, but especially the speed.
I mean, the speed's ridiculous. He stole 130 bags and was caught 11 times.
Pretty good.
That's a pretty good ratio, right? He's got a really nice hit tool. He can be kind of a slap hitter at times, but that works. He's a lefty, so hitting left-handed with that kind of speed and being a slap hitter, we've seen Ichiro do it, right? This guy's got monster speed. I think he could be in the mold of an Ichiro type guy. Like that plus hit tool is not there yet, right? But in terms of really excellent defense, high-end speed, the power flashes every so often. He's not going to be a big-time, power guy. But I think it's exactly the infusion of traits that the Orioles needed, right? If you think about the guys that we've been talking about with them, Adley Rutschman, catcher, elite hit tool, very good power, right? Gunnar Henderson, power over speed, pretty nice hit tool, although it's not coming through right now, whatever. Colton Cowser, power for days, right? Not exactly in the speed department. Heston Kjerstad, power, right? They don't really have elite speed. This guy fills that hole. He can be a top of the order hitter and then just go buck wild on the bases.
Was it any shock that Milwaukee took Brock Wilken out of Wake Forest, considering that when you look at their lineup now, it's pretty much all home run or nothing?
No,
not saying that
they also don't really have a third baseman in their system, so it fits. As a current owner of Brock Wilken in a Dynasty League, I really do like this this pick, him going to an NL Central team. Milwaukee's home park's pretty nice for power. Yeah, I mean, he's got power for days. Whether he makes a lot of contact, we'll see. But I did think it fit who they are.
Okay, well, I was just actually going to say that with the Rays pick at 19, and now I'm basically going to sound like I'm just copying you. But my original question before you just said that, which I guess now Wilkins get into that conversation, but Braden Taylor to the Rays, when you read kind of his scouting report and what you know about him, this was a team identity pick through and through. Like he sounds like a Rays guy. The name's a Rays guy. His play, you could right now you could slap a Tampa Bay Rays jersey on while he was playing in college, and I would have been like, you know what, that tracks. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep. He is, so why am I saying I like Braden Taylor, but I didn't like, Tommy Troy or Matt Shaw? Well, Braden Taylor's got a little higher skill set, right? His stuff is more above average across the board than Shaw and Troy, who are more average. But I also just think that, Braden Taylor was more productive across the board in college than both of those guys more consistently. And this is a team that I just trust in developing guys. Like that's about all there is to it. He's very enticing. He can play a few different spots, which, as we all know, the Rays love to do with folks. Just go ask Taylor Walls. But I do think he probably settles down to second base, which they haven't really had a lockdown second baseman for a little while.
And of course, the Rays will Ray. It seems to work. And then you just look at Taylor's numbers, double-digit homers and steals each year in college. And then actually 2022 had more walks and strikeouts as he did in 2021, but almost did it again in 2023 with an OPS over 1,000 each year.
That's what the Rays look for.
That's what the Rays do. Outside of the top out, let's start at 21 because we already talked about Namala going to the Blue Jays and how much we like that pick at 20. Outside of 20, what picks stand out to you? I think about like 8 or 9 months ago, if you would have told the Braves that they would have got Herson Waldrop at 24, they'd be jumping for joy. I think that's just a generalization I'm going to make given kind of how the pitching is shaken out here in the draft. And then obviously the Mariners got the prospect promotion incentive pick at 29 and then a couple picks in the competitive balance round A. What after pick 21, including pick 21, kind of caught your eye that maybe those in dynasty formats are like, hey, this is a pretty good spot for this guy?
So Chase Davis, the pick at 21, has a very, very nice swing. I'm kind of surprised to see him in that spot. I'm a little iffy on Hayden Waldrop or Hurston Waldrop, to be honest. Little higher upside with him going to the Braves because their history of developing guys, but I thought there's some reliever risk with him coming out of Florida. Not only from his stuff, but also if you think back to the Florida starting pitching, we haven't really seen it pan out in the majors just yet, right? There was the year where they had like 5 dudes who got their entire rotation got drafted in the first round, and almost none of them made an impact at a major league level. So I'm a little iffy on him, but my favorite pick was Aiden Miller, 2 actually. Aiden Miller to the Phillies at 27, and Colin Houck to the Mets. That's right, I'm an Nats fan complimenting the Phillies and the Mets there. Both of those dudes should have gone 15 picks before they went. And for the Mets to overspend and thus forfeit their first round pick and get bumped to basically the comp round and still get a guy they probably should have gotten at 22nd. Great job. Both of those dudes have very, very good tools. Aiden Miller I listed as my favorite hitter outside the top 5 picks in my prospect report a week ago. He can play basically anywhere with power and speed to go with it, which is what the Phillies need. Houck, we'll see where they move him to, but he could play shortstop or third base or move to a corner outfield if the Mets need him to. So I like both of those picks quite a lot.
I know we're focusing on day one, and I'm going to ask you the obligatory what team won and what team lost. But as we're recording this, we did
Well,
get
I
in.
do have a head scratcher though in that range though.
Oh, okay.
Normally, this is a team that I love their picks, but I really don't get Kendall George to the Dodgers. I really don't get it. He's got speed. People like you can joke that he's got a 90 grade speed on a 2080 scale. Like he's ridiculously fast, right? But that's basically it. Like he is Enrique Bradfield with worse power, worse hit tool, slightly worse, like worse arm. So what are you doing taking that? And I know the Dodgers are usually pretty good at developing dudes. Um, but they have outfield depth in their system. They really only need like two other, maybe one other outfield right now because they got Betts and James Outman's not going anywhere. They have Andy Pages still there. They've got Josie DePaula who's coming up. So I just don't get the reach. You could have gotten them two rounds later and saved yourself some money and still gotten upside dudes in this spot. It's just a weird pick.
I hear you there. I'll apologize for potentially blocking you from your Dodger slander. So I wanted to make sure I apologize for that. But let me go back to what I was going to ask you there. When we're recording this, we already got into day 2 of the draft, so there were some picks going off the board. A couple weeks ago, we had talked about Travis Sikora as a potential ace that you'll want to take note of where he landed, and he did land with your Nationals. How did the rest of Major League Baseball let him fall into your lap?
I think they're afraid of the signability aspect because he's from Texas, he's from Round Rock. If those of you missed it, I put him in my prospect report last week breaking down. He was my favorite sleeper of the first round, which is a weird thing, but nobody was talking about him, and I think this guy's a frontline starter. He's big, he's durable. Righty's got some serious velo, spin, good feel for secondary stuff. He has a commitment to Texas, which for a Texas kid, pretty big deal, right? So I think some teams were afraid that they could buy him out of that. The Nats, by the way, followed that with I think 4 straight grad school dudes or college seniors who are reasonably talented guys, but they have no leverage in signing. So they could offer them well below slot money and they have no leverage. And then they get the money to go sign Travis Sikora and buy him out of a Texas commitment.
Yep, just wanted to give you that one. Then, of course, Matt, real quick, I got to ask you before we get to our next segment, what team won the draft, at least on day 1, in your opinion, and what team lost it? I have a guess on the latter, but I'll let you answer your biggest draft winner and biggest draft loser on a team basis.
So my biggest draft winner is Miami. We talked about Noble Meyer in the Comp B or Comp A round. They took Thomas White, who was in the discussion for their number 10 overall pick. He's the best lefty pitcher in the draft. Also a prep kid, so he's the second best high school pitcher. So they got the number 1 and number 2 best high school pitchers in the draft. And they took Thomas White at 35th, who was in discussion for the 10th best or 10th overall pick. They also took Kemp Alderman, who they listed as an outfielder, but you could put him at catcher, which is pretty intriguing. And the guy's got a lot of power, which they also need in that Miami lineup. So that was their picks through the first 2 rounds with day 1. Losers, look, it's hard for me to go full bore on the Dodgers. They did, in fact, take Jake Geloff, the brother of Zach Geloff, the A's prospect. They took Jake Geloff, who, by the way, probably could have gone at their 36th pick, and then they could have swapped both of them, and then I wouldn't be crapping on them for Kendall George. So I can't fully go there. I might actually go with the Astros. They only had 2 picks on the first day. They took Bryce Matthews at 28, who probably could have gone off the board about 60th. They drafted him at shortstop, but he's probably going to move to second base. He's okay. He's just not a first round pick. And then Alonzo Treadwell, a pitcher out of UCLA. He's all right, but nothing special. So I would go with the Astros not doing very well in the draft.
And we're recording this. It's the All-Star break. So, of course, we'll have we're recording this, the Home Run Derby starting in a couple of hours, obviously, and then the All-Star game. Get a little day or 2 off and then jump back into it. So, Matt, just want to spend a couple of minutes doing a first half look back looking back through the first half of the year, obviously you and I did a lot of draft guide content, mainly the sleepers and the busts, and just from all the different drafts that we have done, what are some of the things you got right? What are some of the things that you got wrong? Maybe the second edition of this week, we'll look into things maybe a little bit more as well. But I'll kind of just tell you here first. And like I said, you and I had done the sleepers article. Two of the pitchers we had in there, Justin Steele, Eduardo Rodriguez. If it weren't for the injuries, slam dunks. And even when they have been healthy, they've been very darn good. Like Steele, sub-3 ERA. Erod's been very good when he's been on the mound. So those are two that I know I believe I'm going to say I got right. Other than that, second base, I remember writing up some like value plays at second base. I thought Jonathan India was going far too low in drafts. Even I don't know if I could have predicted this type of output, excuse me, that he's been putting out.
Yeah, he's been ridiculously good.
Yeah, so that one is a hit. And then, albeit that he's faded a lot, and like, I mean, a lot.
Yeah, he didn't have a home run in June, I'm pretty sure.
Nolan Gorman has been overall, for where you got him, what you got in the beginning part of the year, he may not even be on your team now, to be honest. But talk about a late round dart throw at second base that I identified there. That's the one that I'm going to say I got right. And then I'm going to, before I kick it over to you, I'm going to your hometown boy. I was all in on Lane Thomas this year. What he did last year was, I'm going to say, pretty good. I know an underdog. He was super cheap in underdog best ball draft. I was getting him anywhere. He was one of more of my highly owned outfielders. And right now, through 60 or 89 games this year, 14 homers. He's coming up on the 17 he hit last year already. He's already at 8 stolen bases, hitting 302. I don't know if he's going to stay above 300 for the season, but let's say even with a cooler second half, for this guy who was free in underdog drafts for the most part, and other drafts was still going pretty late. I mean, a 280-ish batting average, 20 home runs, 10 plus stolen bases. Absolutely. So shout out Lane Thomas for what he's done this year. And then also Starling Marte. The steals have been very nice. Everything else has been brutal. I'm going to count that at least as a small win in my little notebook that I'm tracking W's and L's. So don't worry. We're going to get to my L's because I got some major ones there. But for now, let me celebrate these W's that I got for right now. But Matt, I know we did a lot of work together, but what were some of the ones that you got right, at least in the first half of the year?
Yeah, let's put it this way. I regret the trade. I traded away Lane Thomas for Vaughn Grissom, hoping against everything possible that the defense would allow him to stick, and that did not, and I'm getting burned. But we all make bad trades from time to time.
Sure do.
Also going from the sleepers, Alex Cobb and Merrill Kelly. They've been, Alex Cobb's got a sub-3 ERA and striking a bunch of dudes out. So he's looked really nice. Merrill Kelly, very solid, right? Nothing spectacular, but like he was basically free. Granted, the Diamondbacks are overachieving. Still taking credit for Merrill Kelly. Sticking in Arizona, my top rookie was Corbin Carroll. That's borne out to be spectacularly true. Even with a duct-taped shoulder, the dude's still producing. Josh Jung, another rookie that I listed in there, he's going to the All-Star game and deserves it. He's been fantastic for Texas at third base. Japanese import, Masataka Yoshida, I had in the rookie piece because technically he counted as a major league rookie. He's been great. Like, I know we give Boston a lot of flack for being bad and in last place, but they're still above 500. They're still within striking distance of an AL wildcard spot. And Masataka Yoshida has been doing it with power, with speed. His batting average is really nice, and he's driving in a pretty nice amount of runs. So we'll do that. And then from my shift article, players that could benefit from the ban of the shift. How about the reclamation project that is Cody Bellinger?
Mm-hmm.
He's having a pretty nice year. So those are a couple of the guys I will take credit for being good on.
I will agree with you as well. And I'm also looking back in the MLB draft guide that we had in the mock draft 3.0. You were involved in that one. I actually was not. I'm going to look at the other ones here to look at my teams. But in that draft, your first couple picks, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Austin Riley, Shane McClanahan, Fernando Tatis, Adolis Garcia, Adley Rutschman, and Zach Allen.
Almost like
pretty good. That's a pretty good first 7, though. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to look back.
All of those dudes, I'm pretty sure, in the All-Star game, and Zach Gallen is starting for the NL.
And then also, I mean, you got Kershaw in round 12. Back into the draft a
Did I
little.
play this team out? Because I'm pretty sure I'd be
I
winning the
don't know
league.
if you want to after round 12, but hey, you did
No, I
for the
mean,
mock. You
12
were fine.
dudes hitting the top half of a baseball draft is pretty impressive.
No, I would fully agree. Now let me start with this. Where did I go wrong?
I went wrong a lot of places.
And
Where
I
did you
went
go
wrong a lot of places. I can tell you that. So first and foremost, one of the busts that I put in the article was Wander Franco. The tools were there. I was worried about injury risk and banking rather high-end fantasy production on a guy who at best was going to give me some batting average and runs. I knew there'd be a little bit of home run jump, but batting average and runs I thought you could get later. The power's been good. The batting average has been good. I'm not going to make excuses. I don't know if I could ever have envisioned 28 stolen bases in a handful of games for Wander Franco. 20 plus for a season, I think he could get there. I thought he could get there. I was skeptical about it. What he's done this year is insane. This is insane running. And I'm happy for him because I do have some shares of him in some places. So I am happy about it. But I'm not afraid to admit that I missed on Wander Franco. I continue to be under consensus on Marcus Semien, and he continues to prove me wrong as he just continues to hit. And this Texas offense just became one of the best offenses in baseball. So, I mean, with him being at the top of it, totally understand it. And he's been very good this year. Jared Kelenic, I'm going to have to admit it. I was completely out on him. I don't think I have a one share of Jared Kelenic anywhere.
Well, okay, but he's kind of making up for that in June through July right now.
For sure. But it's like reverse Nolan Gorman. He started hot, go cold. I'm going to count that as a win. I got to count this as a loss. So I just got to, I got to play both sides. And then this is kind of like a side miss per se. I was all in on Jimmy Herget taking over the closing role in Los Angeles this season. I did not like what Carlos Estevez was doing in the spring, and Herget's been okay in the minors, not the majors. So you have that. I missed on that one there. Those are some of the biggest ones that I got wrong. What say you at the Selz Man on Twitter?
So in the sleeper article that we split, I was fully in on a rebound from Anthony Rendon. That has not come to fruition in the least. Started the year off getting suspended for yelling at a fan. Then got injured, came back. Then I think he got injured again. And after hitting above 300 for the first 15 games of the season, he's now down to 230 for the year. There's basically been no power. Not ideal. Sticking with the Angels, Patrick Sandoval has been mostly a disaster this year. It's not been great. I believed in his secondary stuff. Apparently, it didn't believe in itself because it's flat out disappeared. Then we're going to Baltimore here. We're going to double up the two rookies from Baltimore, Grayson Rodriguez and Gunnar Henderson. Gunnar has been good in spurts, but the batting average is not great, and Grayson Rodriguez has been stuck in the minors after getting lit up in the majors. Now, he's lighting up the minors, but we'll see when he comes back. And Kevin Biggio, I thought could be in for a rebound because, the WOBA and the expected batting average against when not facing the shift was so much higher last year than it was against the shift, and now not having to deal with it. Nope, now he's actually hitting worse than he did last year. He's under 200 for the batting average with basically no power and no speed. So I definitely missed fairly big on those guys.
And
such is life.
That is life, because I'm looking here at underdog. It's not like my highest exposure. Like Brian De La Cruz, fine. Where he was going, fine. Eduardo Rodriguez, fine. But then Andres Jimenez only started coming along of late. I have a lot of Jazz Chisholm Jr. Injuries be damned on that one. Yeah. Jeffrey Springs.
When he's been on the field, he's been good, but he's not on the field.
For sure. But then I have Dalton Varsho hasn't been all that great this year. I'm a lot of Garrett Mitchell. I have a lot of Christian Javier, as we talked about him in recent episodes. That's been a fall far from grace. But
yes,
Matt, it's the Monday edition that we're recording this, possibly Tuesday by the time it comes out. Time for everyone's favorite game show in America. Name that player. So, Matt, AL West catcher. Amongst qualified hitters, I have the 13th highest WAR, and amongst catchers with at least 50 plate appearances on the year, only Sean Murphy and I have 10 plus homers with 55 or more RBI. I'm also sporting a 282 average and a 474 slug. Who is this catcher, and just how lucky have fantasy managers been to have a guy like him behind the dish? Whereas before the season, we probably wouldn't have been saying that.
I believe you are Jonah Heim.
I am indeed.
From Texas, and I love to see this. I thought that he was capable of something similar to this over a full season, not necessarily in a half a season. But yeah, it's been spectacular. He and Yainer Diaz have been lighting up the catching position in the AL West in the state of Texas. So you got one of those guys, you're golden.
Yep. And I mean, when you look at the numbers too, hard hit rate is up, barrel rate is up. And the good thing is none of those expected statistics are too far off the actual marks.
Nope. It's not smoke and mirrors.
And unless you've been under a rock, this Texas offense, it's a good one to be a part of.
And it's going to be good for another 2 months because it's hot in Texas. Ball carries in that park when it's hot.
It sure does. And then earlier on, just inside the top 15 picks in the MLB draft, there was a player we didn't talk about yet. I was an AL West draft pick, just outside the top 10. And in college, I put forth what could perhaps be the most insane and impressive offensive stat line this past year in college. 447 average, an OPS just under 1,500. And I walked five times as much as I struck out. I had 5 more times walks and strikeouts. Considered a bat first prospect technically, and power only grades out about average. But across the last 2 years at school, I did have 35 home runs and 35 doubles. So who am I? And is this a bat that we need to be paying attention to long term for dynasty formats?
You would be Nolan Shanuel,
the 11th pick in the draft,
Angels,
correct?
Out of Florida Atlantic University.
Mm-hmm.
Go Owls. The stats are impressive, but I don't like the package that it's in. Anybody harken back to when the Diamondbacks took Pavin Smith out of UVA to be the first base replacement for Paul Goldschmidt? Anybody want to tell me how that's working out? He doesn't play first anymore. He plays in the outfield sparingly, and he doesn't hit for home runs. I think that's kind of what we got in Nolan Shanuel. I wanted to put this in my head scratchers for picks 11 through 15. He's a lefty hitting first baseman, which I guess is better than a righty hitting first baseman, but he's not hitting for power. Sure, he hit for 35 homers and 35 doubles. Okay, but the ball carries a little bit in Central Florida there. The level of competition isn't exactly as good as some of the other dudes have faced that were coming out of college. I'm not terribly, not to mention the Angels have sucked at developing hitting, except for like Zach Neto, who came ready to go. And then, by the way, went downhill. Joe Adell has bombed. Matt Tice has switched positions and still bombed. Some of their other dudes, not great. The catcher, who we were all excited about before the season, was not their development. It was a Phillies guy, so not overly excited.
And then over at fantasyalarm.com later this week, I believe it's Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, Matt, your next prospect report will be out.
Wednesday, I will have brand new rankings, including drafted players in the rankings. The 2 dudes drafted at the top, probably going to be inside the top 10.
Well,
overall.
Keep an eye out for that to see just how high Pittsburgh right-hander Paul Skeens, not Washington right-hander, Pittsburgh Pirates right-hander Paul Skeens ranks in Matt's updated prospect rankings. Make sure you check that over at Fantasy Alarm, as well as everything we got over there, including the fantasy football draft guide, which you can get your hands on now. So check that out amidst all of the great content. Thanks for sticking with us for the full hour here. We're back to our normal 30 minutes with the edition coming up later this week. But of course, when the draft's around, we're going to talk about it. Give Matt a follow at the Selz Man. Give me a follow on Twitter at Colby R. Conway. Check out all the great content we have over at fantasyalarm.com. And we will see you later this week with the next edition of the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy